Hello everyone, welcome back. Hope you are staying safe and staying home. As promised, this time I have brought a boilerplate clauses how to draft video. It's the first part of a two-part video where I would be discussing how boilerplate or standard clauses of a contract are drafted. Now, what are boilerplate clauses? This is the first question which anyone would ask. Now, boilerplate clauses are the standard clauses in a contract which you would find uniform across all types of contract. So even a SaaS agreement would have these boilerplate clauses, as well as a commercial procurement agreement would have them. So these are certain clauses which provide you contractual protection, and by the virtue of the same, you have them across all kinds of contracts. Now, the first boilerplate clause which we shall be dealing with is assignment. Now, what is an assignment clause? An assignment clause is when you assign either your rights or your obligations under a contract to a third party. Now, when you are assigning your rights under a contract, you do not need the consent of the other party to the contract. But when you're assigning obligations under the contract, then you would require the consent of the other party. For example, A and B enter into an agreement wherein B is supposed to deliver chairs to A. Now, B, instead of taking consent of A, unilaterally assigns the obligation of delivering chairs to C. Can he do that? No, he cannot. An obligation under a contract cannot be assigned to a third party without the consent of the other party to the contract. Now, this consent, should it be express or should it be implied? Now, if you are drafting an assignment clause, I would suggest that you should always make the consent express and in a written form. So that would create extra burden upon the party to obtain consent before they actually assign the obligations under a contract. Another factor here is, should the assignment clause be unilateral or should it be mutual? Now, it depends upon the negotiating power of the parties. Also, the reason why you are entering into a particular contract. However, generally, in order to avoid unnecessary negotiation, an assignment clause is typically kept mutual. So both the parties would have the power to assign their rights and obligations under the contract, and an express written consent should be built into the clause, so that before a party assigns their obligations on a contract, they actually have to obtain an express written consent of the other party. Now, before you start to draft an assignment clause, you need to understand whether an intent to assign exists or not. So when you draft an assignment clause, it is typically drafted in a negative way. So it would read as neither party would assign the rights and obligations under this contract, either partly or wholly, until and unless an express written consent of the other party has been obtained. So it's couched in a negative manner, wherein you do not have the right to assign until and unless you obtain an express permission from the other party in writing. So it's always better to go with non-assignment than a blanket assignment and make an exception of the consent rather than a rule of assignment without consent. Now, personal obligations cannot be assigned. So for example, if A is a painter and he told you he's going to paint your portrait, so he cannot assign that obligation to someone else. Now, the next boilerplate clause is amendment. Now, when a contract is entered into, an amendment clause should be there so as to make the contract more flexible. So if in the future there is a change in circumstances, the parties can, based on mutual consent, amend the contract. Now, can a unilateral amendment be there? No, a unilateral amendment does not hold good. The amendment should always be done based on mutual consent of the parties. So tomorrow if A and B enter into a contract, A cannot unilaterally change the entire contract or a part of it and tell B that now you're obligated to follow the same. While drafting the amendment clause, make sure that you base it on a mutual consent basis and do not give your party a unilateral amendment right. Now, the next is whether such mutual consent should be written or whether it should be oral. I would suggest you should always have the written consent requirement built in your contractual clause. Because you can say that, yes, I asked you that I was going to change the contract. You said yes. You won't even remember when you said yes. So don't really depend on anything oral. Have everything in writing, including the consent. Now, the next clause would be entire agreement. Now, before a party enters into a formal written contract, there could be a multitude of communication between the two parties. So there could be a MOU which they entered into, there could be multiple emails which they exchanged, there could be other transactional documents. So when you enter into a definitive contract, what would be the legal effect of this pre-contractual understanding that you have? So in order to eliminate any kind of confusion, what parties do is that they include the entire agreement clause. Now, the entire agreement clause defines the scope of the contract. So it would say that all prior understandings or all pre-contractual understandings before the contract came into existence would now stand null and void, and it would only be this particular contract which would be construed to be an entire agreement. And it is this entire agreement which is going to govern the relations between the parties. So, for instance, if there was a MOU before a definitive contract came into being, and in the MOU maybe the price was mentioned something else. Now, after repeated negotiations, the parties agreed to a lesser price. This lesser price was captured in the subsequent contract which came into force. Now, tomorrow, if the vendor comes back and he says that, no, the MOU said that you were supposed to pay me this much. So, and you would say, no, but the contract says this much. How would this be resolved? This is exactly why an entire agreement clause is put in. So if you have an entire agreement clause, you can argue that this particular clause says that the relationship between the parties would be governed by this contract and only this contract, and no pre-contractual understanding stands valid right now. Now, whether like the pre-contractual understanding is oral or it is in writing, it should be done away with under the entire agreement clause. So, for instance, if there was a telephonic conversation or if there were emails exchanged, everything, all pre-contractual understandings should be captured in the entire agreement clause. Another thing is there are a lot of times when parties would want certain pre-contractual understandings to be a part of the contract, or maybe certain supplemental agreements which they have entered into. For example, a lot of times people enter into NDAs separately from the main contract, or maybe it's a master service agreement and there are various individual agreements which have been entered under it. And if they want the entire plethora of the agreement to constitute one single entire agreement, that can also be done here. So under an entire agreement clause, you can say that this agreement along with the NDA dated this date, and the annexures dated this date, and the other agreements which we had entered into for the purposes of XYZ are also a part of this entire agreement clause. And the contract would not be seen in isolation of them, but would be seen in totality of all those agreements together. So those agreements together would constitute the entire agreement. So you can either exclude pre-contractual understanding, you can include whatever you want to include. If there's a supplemental agreements, you can include the same under an entire agreement clause as well. Now, the next boilerplate clause is force majeure. So as we all know, due to coronavirus, this clause has been extensively debated. So force majeure clause is a boilerplate clause. Before coronavirus, honestly, people wouldn't really pay much attention to a force majeure clause. It just lay there. the force majeure event is an event which triggers the suspension of obligations of the parties. So the parties can agree that if certain events happen, their obligations can remain suspended for a particular period of time. And once this situation or circumstance abates, then they can resume with the contract. Another thing is, if the situation continues for an indefinite period of time, there is also an option of terminating the contract. Now, the first thing which you should keep in mind while drafting a force majeure clause is that it should be broad enough to cover almost all kinds of eventualities. So this is a problem which is being faced these days, that a lot of force majeure clauses did not have the word pandemic or epidemic or disease. Now, how does a party suspend its obligation in the absence of such a clause? So those things are coming into picture. You need to have a broad scope of the force majeure clause and mention as many eventualities as you can. The next thing is use suffix such as including but not limited to. So this is going to show that whatever force majeure events you have mentioned in the clause are not exhaustive, but other events can also be included in the same. Then the process of invocation. How do you invoke the force majeure clause? Do you need to give a notice to the other party? Is there a stipulated time period within which you can invoke the same? All these things need to be captured in the force majeure clause as well. So this is the part 1 of the drafting of boilerplate clauses video. I would be coming back with the part 2 where I would be discussing other boilerplate clauses as well. So please let me know if you want anything else as a part of the subsequent video. If you have any doubts, please feel free to message me on LinkedIn. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to the same. Thank you. Have a safe day. Stay safe. Stay home.